Hi there, Rena. Yes, two critical decisions today. One, state leaders did extend the governor's emergency powers during this peacetime emergency. The second, we have a surprising new leader of the state Senate.
Before the special session even started, state leaders made it clear Democrats want to support the governor's approach to fighting COVID-19.
The governor needs all the tools in the toolbox.
While Republicans say they want more say in the plans for battle.
To just get the legislature kind of re-involved in the process.
And that desire to be a bigger part of the process resulted in Republicans offering a new plan.
The process the governor has used has effectively taken away some of our power.
Under Representative Barb Haley's bill, the legislature would be able to vote up or down any executive order after 30 days. Translation, Republicans say they could review the governor's decisions.
And my goal today is very sincerely to bring some balance in power back between the relationship between the legislature and the governor.
But House Democrats disagreed and voted down the bill, but not before making some passionate points of their own, including one by Representative Mann, also a doctor.
We are not okay. We are struggling to take care of you.
Meantime, an unusual vote over in the Senate.
And Senator Tomassoni is elected president of the Senate.
The Republican-led Senate voted to make DFL Senator David Tomassoni the Senate president. That move ahead of a possible domino effect. In short, if U.S. Senator Amy Klobuchar gets appointed to a Biden administration, and if the governor appoints Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan to Klobuchar's seat, then Tomassoni, not Republican Senator Jeremy Miller, would fill the lieutenant governor's seat.
Now, further explanation on that. Essentially, there would be a special election to fill whoever would be taking that lieutenant governor position, and Republicans simply do not want to risk their majority. We'll have more on that passionate debate coming up at 6. Serena?